Do you ever ask yourself, am I playing too small? Have I left it too late to start afresh? Will I come to the end of my life and feel that I somehow let myself down? This is your invitation to hear from some amazing people who have asked themselves those very same questions and chose to wake the F up, to get off the hamster wheel of mediocrity and seize the life that was calling them. Be inspired and be challenged to discover who you have the potential to become and the contribution you're here to make. And now, here to guide you on the most important quest of your life is your host, Janet Hogan.
Have you ever experienced office bullying, where someone in your team is so toxic it leaves you feeling sick to the stomach, waking up at 3 a.m. just from the very thought of having to show up for work the next day? Well, that's what happened to the person you're about to meet, to the point where her doctor advised her to leave the job or risk a nervous breakdown. As it turned out, this was the best piece of advice she could have ever received. And so it's with great pleasure that I introduce our inspirational guest, Joanne Martin, who can now thank this office bully for helping her to wake the F up to her untapped genius as an international best-selling author and book writing coach. Who would have thought? And as Joanne is about to share with you, there's a lot more to becoming a best-selling author than penning some compelling words and hitting send. Joanne, welcome to the show. And let's start with your toxic office experience, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of listeners who can relate to this. What happened and how did you make the leap to where you are now?
Thanks, Janet. So I was working in a very high-profile role. I had a team I was leading. It was actually my direct boss, and he and I just, from a personality perspective, did not connect. And he really went out of his way to make my life more difficult, to the point where, other more senior people were saying, that relationship is broken. And I'm like, yes, not for lack of trying to make it work. And he would even, I recommended somebody for an award within my team. And he actually then, went over my head and recommended somebody else who was on a career management pathway. So they weren't even performing in their role. And it just, made my life extremely difficult.
And so can you describe the point that you came to where you were feeling very, very stressed? What was going through your mind and what was the action that you took at that point, Jo?
I was at a bit of a crossroads with what I wanted to do. And I was at that point where I was thinking, I might like to have kids, and, how did the career fit into that? And work was just stressful. Like, I was getting to work at 6 o'clock in the morning. I was leaving at 8 o'clock at night. Sometimes later I was working when I was at home. And I went and saw my doctor and, started talking to her about having kids and what the implications would be. And after I'd seen her a couple of times, she was just like, you need to leave that job. It is far too stressful, and that is not going to make a good platform, for wanting to start a family. So that was the trigger, I guess. And I did. I just went, that's it. I'm going to resign. I have no idea, what's going to happen next. And I took a much more junior role somewhere else, just to be doing something, so I wasn't sitting around. And I think that's probably one of the best things I ever did, because it gave me the spaciousness to think about what I really wanted from life. And I was only in that other role for probably 6 weeks.
Oh, interesting. So what was going through your mind? Because I get the impression that you weren't very clear on what you made the big leap, but you weren't really very clear on where you were leaping to. Is that right?
Yeah, well, it was. I just need to get out of this very toxic situation, away from this person who is going out of their way. It was almost like it was their daily mission to make my life difficult. And be free of that. And so I started, reading things like books by the Dalai Lama and other such books while I was in that short-term role. And that's where I realised that, my core strength was in communication and in writing. And I'd always been interested in books. So it was a good opportunity to start, exploring things in that realm. And I did, find that as soon as I made that decision, things just fell into place. It's almost like a domino effect. Yeah, something turns up and the next thing turns up, and then you're like, oh, okay, and this is the right path. So there was no resistance.
It's really interesting because, so many of us are brought up as kids, aren't we, to, we gravitate towards the humanities or the arts, painting, drawing, writing. And of course, the first thing we're told is, oh, you could never make a living from that. Did you have those words ringing through your ears while you were holding up the possibility of becoming a full-time writer?
Oh, absolutely. So, everybody's got advice for you. And I think, as well-meaning as that might be, they're not the ones walking in your shoes, and they're not the ones living with the consequences of those decisions. And I really think that for me, I had to stay true to myself and what was going to make me happy. And so I kind of thanked everybody for their advice, but just kept moving forward with my path. And now everyone's like, oh, that was such a good decision for you. So it's interesting how people come on board once they can see that it actually is working.
Yeah. And I hear that, just from what I know of you, you are an action taker. So what were the kind of steps that you were taking to progress yourself along that path?
Well, I actually did some courses to improve my writing. So even though I was naturally a good writer, and I'd written, for the school newspaper years ago, and, I'd written for other, newspaper articles and that type of thing, I did some courses. I started learning about self-publishing, and I really looked at your different genres of books and how you can write well for that genre and that sort of thing. So it gave me much more knowledge than what I had initially when I wrote my first children's book, which I haven't actually published to this point, and I am currently refining to publish a bit later this year. I realised that, I had no idea. I had a good story, but I didn't have any idea of what was going to appeal to my target audience. So the young readers, the parents, that type of thing. So some of those short courses that I did actually really helped me refine, what the product that I have to sell.
Yeah. So if I can just summarize that transition point, because I think that's the critical piece here. I know myself, when I got stuck in so many different businesses I was running, and I kind of had to crash to go, well, what the hell am I doing with my life? And I would have loved to have known what the steps were to get me out of that dark place. But it sounds like you did do some introspective work, reading the philosophers and the thought leaders like the Dalai Lama. And then you also did some courses to brush up on your skills. And It sounds like you might have also done some reflection on your past, noticing that actually this was showing up in your childhood as well. Would that be right?
Yes, yeah. Look, I did, definitely. And, I did a lot of mindset work as well. So really working on my mindset, clearing programming and beliefs that you basically learn over time to get past some of those things. And, I did dabble in like the healing arts, so energy clearings and crystal healings and different things like that, just to shift that energy away, so that it wasn't a recurring pattern, because that was something I was conscious of. When you've been in a workplace bullying situation, often, that becomes a pattern. So I wanted to make sure that I broke that cycle and that I didn't, live that again. And that has been, a good decision to do some work around that. Some people, they might choose more a traditional path and see a psychologist or something like that. I chose, to go down that mindset path instead, and the more alternative healing route. And I think that really helped me, and it's helped with what I do today as well, in being more mindful around what I do.
And was that a path you'd explored in the past, the alternate healing route?
Well, not really, because I actually had some friends who were energy healers at the time, and I didn't really, I guess, give credit to what they actually could do, because they were friends and they do a few healings on you, and I'd always think, oh yeah, that was nice, but am I getting any benefit? So it wasn't until I did some more research and actually started learning a bit more about it that I understood the inherent value of that sort of work.
Yes, yeah. And tell me, just if you could share with us, Joanne, what were some of the beliefs that you realised had been keeping you in this non-productive, recurring behaviour pattern? What were some of the things, that the insights that you got, some of the programming that you're talking about?
Yeah. So I think I really believed that I had to have a job and like, a high flying job really to be successful. And, the more you climbed that corporate ladder and the more money you earned and the more you were out and about, I was out every night, dinners and drinks and whatever. That was actually a measure of success. But what I realized when I stepped away from that world was that a lot of those people just disappeared from my life anyway. They weren't really genuine, friendships as such. It was more just you happened to work together and everybody wanted to go and do something after work. And, there was a lot more to life than that, kind of work hard, play hard kind of lifestyle that I had thought and believed that I needed in order to be successful.
And yeah, it's so interesting. And so now that you can look back, because it's hard, isn't it? When we're the fish in the fishbowl, we can't really see how murky the water is or how toxic it might be. But now when you look back, how would you describe the difference between how you felt day to day back then and how you feel now?
Oh, look, I was definitely unhappy. So I thought I was happy because I ticked all these things off and I had my university degree and I turned that into a career and, I was earning good money and I was out and about all the time and, I could afford to do the things that I wanted to do. So, part of me believed I was happy. But if I look at myself now, when I walk down the street, I'm smiling. When I walked down the street back then, I was probably glaring at everybody who walked past me, thinking I've had a really rough morning and just get out of my way. Like, that's the reality of being in that environment.
It's so true, isn't it? When you walk through the city, I notice personally how many people are wearing black or grey. And they carry these scowls, and we don't even realise. We probably we hate looking in the mirror in the first place. But if we could catch ourselves, we'd probably be horrified. And so, as you know, Joe, I deal a lot with people who are stuck, who are kind of probably where you were in that corporate world, and don't know how to make that transition. Can't really envisage making that leap. And of course, we see people. In the writing sphere who get stuck, we've got a name for it, writer's block. So how do you help get people through that? Is there a magic formula, or what do you do when someone says to you, because I know and we'll get more to what you're doing now, but I know, you're working with people to help them get their books out. How do you help them get over this thing we call writer's block?
Yeah. Well, look, I don't think there's, the magic formula as such to overcoming writer's block, because it's different for everyone and everybody has different triggers or different, obstacles they're going to come up against when they're writing. So, depending on the person and what it is, I recommend a variety of things. So with some people, I just say to them, just leave it and go for a walk and, come back to it tomorrow. It'll still be there. And just clear, your head. And as you're walking, start clearing some of those beliefs you have around the writing. So I have a very short sort of phrase that I give people, which is, I clear all positive and negative emotions with, and in this case, it's writer's block. So, they would be saying to themselves, I clear all positive and negative emotions with writer's block. And then I get them to clear any other words that come up in relation to that. And, for some people that works. For others, it could be, where they're trying to write in the house. So I find, personally, I do my best writing sitting in bed at 3 a.m. That's just how I work. If I sit at a desk, I find my creativity is stifled and it just doesn't happen. But if I'm editing, I need to sit at a desk. So, it can be the time of the day, it can be the location that you're writing. And, for others where they're just not sure where to start, then I always just say to them, just start, just write. And, the words will flow. And sometimes I give them something like, if money were no object, I would. And then just start writing with that. And then they'll find that then that will flow and they can then start writing about the topic they're trying to talk about. Because quite often the block is on the first word to put on the page.
Mm. Yeah.
And when people get very caught up on that. So I always advise, new writers particularly to create a plan. So a lot of people say, I just want it to flow and I don't need a plan. And I'm like, you don't need to write a 60-page document. You can have like a mind map on a page that is, what your key topic is, what some of the subtopics are, it's just some things for you to spark your memory around some of the examples you might want to include. And that, is another way just to start writing, but you're actually creating something that will then guide you in that writing process. But it really is different for everyone. Some people meditate and it works for them.
Yeah. Well, I really like that. It's almost like an alternate approach you have to helping people birth their books. Can you describe for me, so when you left, just to backpedal a little bit, when you left your corporate career and decided pretty much that you were going to commit to being a writer, what was then the transition to how much are you a writer and how much are you a writing coach now? Just talk to that a little bit. What happened there?
So I think that there are ebbs and flows with that. So sometimes I'm much more the writer and other times I'm much more the writing coach. At the moment, I've got a multi-author book that is being developed. So everybody has been writing their chapter. So I've been very much in that writing coach space and, doing the initial, not full edit, but reading through what they've got and picking things out and highlighting where, they might need to make that story stronger or, actually loop back to what their key sort of idea was, that sort of thing. However, now that, those chapters are in and we go into that editing phase, and I do use, other people to do the editing so that there's a different lens on the work, and we go more into that promotional phase for the book, I've got more time to write. So what I've been finding now is that I'm doing more writing of my own. So I think it's sort of almost project-based. Yeah. My ideal is to have, probably a good balance between that, maybe 50% writing coach and 50% as the writer. So that's my thing I'm striving towards at the moment, is to create genuine balance there.
And just describe for me, Jo, what's that moment where you light up most? Because, we all have this little inner spark, and I think it's when that inner spark gets extinguished that we might feel sadness or frustration or, I've experienced all of this when I was in the wrong job, and I never really knew why. I never knew where that came from. And I only realised later that it was really the pain of self-betrayal, that I wasn't living up to who I was supposed to be. So when you're in that space where you are living up to who you are supposed to be, what are you doing exactly? Can you define that moment?
So for me personally, that is helping other people actually shine at what they do. So something when I discovered when I first started my publishing company was that there are a lot of people out there doing amazing work and nobody knows about it. Their local communities might know, or their tribe that they have might know, but fundamentally there's a lot of really good work being done for humanity that no one knows about, and that's what the trigger was for creating the multi-author book that I'm working on at the moment, Innovation Secrets, was really there's a lot of people out there who are innovating and doing things differently and actually creating a better world, and I wanted to be able to showcase them. So for me, I guess the part I love in the publishing space is watching the transformation and the journey that those authors go on, and the realization within them that they can make a difference and that they have a platform and that they have a voice. And if you think about the media right now, it's very censored. It's very agenda driven, and often the true meaning of things is not conveyed. The true meaning of everything is just rolled out under whatever the agenda at the time is. So the beauty of authoring a book is you can actually speak with authenticity, your true voice, and really tell. And there is a transformation point. So I've had a lot of emails in the last couple of days from my current authors telling me that, they've been on an amazing journey and they could hear my voice in their head as they were writing and realising, that transformation that was actually happening as they were telling their stories. So I think it's that piece.
Wow, that's powerful. So what I'm hearing is where you light up now is really helping others to shine their light and to make their contribution to the world. So you're doing what you love, But what it seems what really drives you is the ability to catapult others into their relevant spotlight so that their work is seen and heard on a platform where they're not censored. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And where, that they can really honour that work that they're doing.
Yeah.
Without having to frame it in a different paradigm that potentially it shouldn't sit within anyway.
Yeah. No, I think that's wonderful. And I've noticed in my own path, when you have that thing that's bigger than yourself, it's much easier to get out of bed every morning. Have you noticed that?
Yes. Yeah, look, it absolutely is. And, I find even with my own writing, my writing now is much more inspired because of the people that I'm helping on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And, and seeing them rise, then I think triggers something within me as well. So more of a passion or a fire to, be more authentic around the work that I put out there as well. Yeah.
Well, and possibly, that's the key to writer's block too, Jo, is, because that fear of judgment, what are people going to think of me? Am I going to get a terrible review? And it keeps us in this fear space. And of course, that's just our ego, isn't it? Trying to protect us and say, do not put a word on that blank piece of paper or you will meet your judgment day. And the moment you get into that bigger space of, well, actually, it's not about me, it's about something beyond that, beyond me, the fear seems to dissipate, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And I think, I've had one author who's gone from, I'm in my career and I really, think I need to stay here for 5 years and then I'd like to write a book, a solo book. And that, is kind of my pathway. So this is setting that up. And I was like, the runway for that is far too long. You really, if you're going to write now in a multi-author book, you want to be publishing a book next year because you've got, you'll already have momentum. And I didn't hear from her for a couple of weeks. And then all of a sudden I received, an email saying, I'm really inspired. I've written half my chapter. I've now registered a business name. I've got a web developer working on a website. So it's almost like it expedited what was coming for her anyway. Yeah. And because she'd started doing something that was like the dream. So writing or being part of a book was the dream for her. Yeah. And then, the momentum happened and everything just fell into place. So I guess if you compare it to, my experience working in the corporate world, it was like pushing that wheelbarrow uphill every single day. Nothing was easy. You had to fight for everything, particularly as a woman in a male-dominated industry. And, it was hard and you had to work hard. But, now I work hard, but I work hard in something where there's flow. And I'm not pushing a wheelbarrow uphill because it actually, it has a momentum of its own and I'm attracting the right people and, working with amazing people. And people, actually something I wanted to add here, people will often ask me, do you just take anyone on as an author? And I always answer that question with no, because I do interview everybody and I only work with people where I feel there's a values alignment. I don't just take people on for the money. I know there are a lot of publishers out there who will do that. I don't do that. Yeah. So, I think that my previous experience drives that to some extent because, I feel if they're difficult when I talk to them, they're going to be even more difficult to work with. And that's just not a match or a fit for me in terms of clients.
Yeah. And how would you describe those values, Joanne? What are they? What are you looking for in a person that you'll enjoy a good working relationship together? What are those values that cement that relationship?
Look, I think it's based on mutual respect and I guess understanding and acknowledging that the value that both of you bring to that relationship, because it is a relationship. When you're working with someone on their solo book or even in a multi-author book, you have a lot of interaction. So you've actually got to be able to build that relationship and respect each other's opinions and, I guess, be able to take no for an answer and tweak what you're doing. So I think, for me, it's that, integrity and trust and respect are really some of the key values that I look for. And and I think that comes with people who are at a certain stage within their journey as well.
Definitely. Yeah, that's right. And so because it's also, I imagine, a relationship where you have to get to know someone at a fairly intimate level and level with them whenever they show any kind of resistance to the work. You know, you've got to really have their back for them, I imagine. I was intrigued.
Yes.
In your notes, you make this claim that you can go from the idea to the finished product in 60 days.
Yes.
How is that possible? I know I wrote my own memoir a couple of years ago, and it was and I was pretty diligent with it. But wow, 60 days sounds remarkable. So talk us through that. I'm curious to know how you can do that.
Yeah, so basically it's how I set up the program. So we will do some mindset work, and it really is about getting super clear on what that idea is. So what I find is people have 50 ideas, and then they're trying to start writing a book using all of those ideas, and it's narrowing it down to that one core idea. What it is that they're going to write about, what the objective is, what they expect the outcome to be, and what they've got that supports that in terms of their story. So how they will position that. So it's like creating a plan. We do brainstorming, we create the plan. I have writing prompts for them, so they get weekly writing prompts. They, basically, I'm like a project manager. So every week we'll be checking in and seeing what the progress is. If they're having a writer's block, or they're not sure what direction to go in, then we work through that, clear any blocks around it, and really focus on the outcome. So I often say to my authors when they're complaining that they don't have time, and I'll say to them, I've seen you on social media. You've been in there. You've been getting caught up in whatever.
Yeah.
I can see you
sprung on Facebook. Yeah.
If you've got time for that, you've got time for writing. So it's it's really about having some discipline, setting a time each day that you write, and getting into that flow, and not being distracted by life or social media or any of the other stuff that's going on out there. Yeah. It can be very easy, I find personally, to waste my whole day mucking around with my social media.
Yeah.
So, it's setting that time aside. It's a bit like, you get up in the morning and you have your morning routine, and, you always brush your teeth and, do your hair and have breakfast and whatever you do in the morning, right? So writing needs to be part of your day. Where does it fit in? And you dedicate that time to that. Yeah.
It sounds like you're quite a driver. If we're talking behavior types, you're someone who really does get things done. You like taking action. And I think that that's probably a very good compliment to a lot of people who may be, more in the dreamer space. And the problem is when we embark on a project, we think we have to be all things. We think we've got to wear 7 hats. But I guess for something that's as an extension of the self as writing, you want to stay as true to your true self as you can. And this is really a case where having someone who is a driver, which might not be, for the people listening who might be wanting to write a book, you might not be a driver and you go, how the hell do I get this done? There's nothing wrong with getting someone from the outside to do that aspect of the work for you. In fact, it's probably essential so that you then have the luxury of keeping in your creative, imaginative writing space, where, that dreamer can emerge. So, that makes total sense, Jo, how you would bring a lot of value to that writing space. Is there anything is there anything that you would like to share by way of message to leave with anyone who's listening who might be either in the transition, sitting on a wall in a career they're not happy with, or maybe also they're thinking of writing a book but going, but does the world need another book? Can you talk to those two people, please? What's your advice?
Look, my advice, if you're sitting in a career that, is not in alignment with you, and you're not happy and you're just doing it for the money, or you feel like circumstances are forcing you to be there, look at ways that you can you change your situation, or, change the environment. If you've got to be in a job, perhaps there's another organisation where your values are more in alignment. I'm very much about taking positive action. There is always hope, and there is always some kind of solution. So, if you realise that you need to make a change, it's then just about taking small steps, and it can be incremental steps. It doesn't mean quit your job tomorrow and then work out how you're going to pay your bills and live. It's more around what things can you do today to set you up for a better future tomorrow. And it might be that you need to do some upskilling. And upskilling doesn't mean going and doing a university degree for 3 years. It could be that there are some short courses that you can do that would, fill that skill gap that you have. Or it might be that you actually need to find some interests outside of work so that you're not just purely focused on that environment. And if you're happier outside, it might bring more happiness inside. There are a million ways to actually tackle that. And for the people who, they want to write a book, but they think there's too many books out there, or they don't have time, 1% of the population gets published. Many people write books that never go anywhere other than like either their laptop or their handwritten notes. So there's plenty of space. There's a massive market out there for the right type of books. There's a reader for pretty much anything you could write. So if that is one of your dreams and it's in your heart and you really want to, do that, but you're not quite sure where to start, then it's programs like the one that I'm running at the moment, Write Your Book in 60 Days. They help you get started and keep you accountable and get you taking action. I do speak to a lot of people who've been working on their manuscript for 10 years. And, if that's a fiction novel, then it doesn't get dated. But if it's something where, you're going to write a non-fiction and it might be some kind of self-help thing, then you really need to get that to market much more quickly than a 10-year time frame, because things change so quickly. We've only got to look at what's happening, in the world at the moment. And, the world has changed a number of times in the last couple of years. So I feel like, there's never a good time. You just start and it will happen, and everything will open up when you take action.
Yeah, I really feel that's your motto. You're the embodiment of that, Jo. Just take action. It's so important. And, I always like to fast forward to the end of my life, not that I'm being necessarily grim or melancholic, but, I think the worst possible outcome would be to sense that you come to the end of your life and look back and go, oh, if only I'd, written that book or whatever it is, or left that job. That would be the saddest thing, I think, to live with that regret. So, thank you for sharing your story and your experience, because I think we need people like you. People like you, Jo, are the leaders who show other people the way, and that it is possible, because there are so many doubters and cynics and skeptics out there who say, oh, you're just dreaming, right? And it starts when we're young.
Yes.
So we need to see living proof that you can do it and understand the consequences of not doing it. So I hope you've inspired some of our listeners that, birthing a book doesn't have to involve a gestation of years like an elephant. It can happen in just 60 days.
Yes.
So, you've given this great gift of your story to our listeners. So in return, I'd like to give you a gift, Jo, in the way of a reading, if you like, on what your future holds for you. So if you're listening to this, what I asked Jo to do was complete a quiz that I've put together. The name of this podcast, of course, is Wake the F Up. And after all the years that I've been in business, I find my greatest satisfaction is in waking people up to their true potential, because I lived with the pain of really playing small. And I feel our passion comes from whatever it is that's been the most painful experience in my life. And that was definitely my painful experience, keeping myself small, not allowing any of that flourishing that you talk about, Jo, to happen. So that's why I love what I do now, helping people really see their greatness. So I put this quiz together. It's very simple, called the Magic Triangle Quiz. And I invited Jo to take it. And I'm just going to go through with her now her results, so that if you're listening, you can see how simple it is to start getting clarity on what it is that's important to you. You know, if you're in that space of being stuck in a job, or if you're on the verge of, or you're thinking about writing a book and you're not sure how to do it, there's probably a part of you that's like a yearning that is wanting to be expressed. So in this process, what happens is that three core needs emerge. So in Joanne's case, her three were adventure, wisdom, and financial freedom. And financial freedom emerged as the most important one. So if you think of this like a triangle, you've got at the base of the triangle adventure and wisdom, and then at the top you've got financial freedom. So what I'm going to invite Jo to do now is speak to each of those core needs to share with us what they mean for her. So we're going to start not with the most important one, but the one that comes at the base of the triangle, adventure. So Jo, just share with us, why did adventure come up for you as one of your top three? What does that mean to you? Because there are so many ways of interpreting each of these needs. What does adventure mean to you?
Look, it really means getting out there and living life and having new experiences and trying things. And, you know, if it doesn't work, then finding another way to do things. So I've always been an avid traveller, and, you know, I've had many adventures on my travels. You know, I could probably write a whole book about my travel adventures. You know, so that was really all about, you know, trying new things, doing them differently, and, you know, just experiencing, you know, things that were outside your comfort zone. So, yeah, I guess, yeah, that's for me what it is. It's really that whole, you know, new experiences and, you know, constantly learning. So I guess that's part of, you know, what I'm about, that lifelong learning, but lifelong learning through experience rather than, you know, reading out of books and studying at university. So whilst I do, you know, gain a lot of knowledge and things from doing that, and I like reading, I like to get out and do stuff as well.
Mm. So it's really, what I'm hearing is adventure on many different levels. Prompted by physical adventure, and of course that's been stymied for a lot of us, but through travel. But adventure doesn't have to be limited to the physical world, of course, does it? You know, adventure is also a deep dive into what's potentially the most exciting frontier, the frontier of the self. Would that be right? What you can discover about yourself by taking risks and being curious and courageous. Yeah. Yes,
definitely. And I think it's amazing the inner wisdom that we actually hold, you know, within ourselves that is, I guess, you know, suppressed in the way that we're schooled and things like that. It's not valued in some cultures. You know, I know that inner wisdom and intuition and things like that is actually valued much more highly than it is, you know, in the culture that I grew up within. But that process, you are right, of self-discovery. I did set an intention, you know, years ago now that, you know, every week I wanted to go somewhere I'd never been before. So whether that was a new location, a coffee shop, you know, a business, or, you know, a different beach or something like that, just so that I was always learning and growing and, you know, having adventures, because you would meet random people along the way. And something that's interesting that I've found since I have, you know, followed my true path is that people will just talk to me. I can be walking down the street or, you know, just going to get a coffee or something like that, and random people come up and start talking to me. And I find that quite intriguing, because that never would have happened in my corporate life. In fact, they probably would have been like, oh, don't go near her.
Yeah, she's wearing a suit and a briefcase and she's got shoulder pads. What about...
That's it.
So what I'm hearing there is that adventure also, it's stepping into the unknown, getting out of your comfort zone, right? Whatever that means, taking action to put yourself in a new space and get some form of stimulation from that, you know, emotional, cerebral, whatever. Yeah, injecting excitement. And so let's talk to the next core need, wisdom. You mentioned that just before, Jo. Tell me about wisdom. Again, why is that so important? What does that mean to you?
Look, for me, I have always had an inner knowing that I ignored for quite a long time. That, I used to always say, I lived in Sydney for quite a long time, and, I would always say to people, my destiny's not in Sydney. I know it's not in Sydney. It's somewhere else. It's not here. It was like, an inner knowing. And I found, that I would just know stuff for no apparent reason. There's no reason why I would know it. Almost just like, that old soul knowing about things. And, I did ignore that for a long time. And, to my detriment, I remember, if we put it into a practical example, I was walking along while I was over in Denmark and on the way to a wedding, actually. And I got this clear idea that I needed to take a different path, but I was running a bit late. So I didn't take the different path. And, I kept getting that, you really should go straight ahead rather than turning left here. And it turned out that I slipped and I broke my wrist when I took that left turn, about 3 seconds after I took that left turn. And so I didn't trust my inner wisdom or inner guidance in that scenario, which meant that I spent most of the wedding going between hospitals in Copenhagen rather than actually at the wedding. So, I guess it's that wisdom and understanding some of the work of the old masters and things like that, again, some of the people who've gone before us really had some amazing insights and things that still apply today.
Mm. And thanks, Jo, for that. Yeah, I think that's a great metaphor, that idea of not listening to the inner voice and then being punished for it. The universe gives you a whack on the side of the head and you end up missing out on the main event, the wedding, the show, life. Yeah.
Yes.
What about, tell me about financial freedom. So that's the core need. Tell me about that. What does financial freedom represent for you and why is that so important?
So it represents for me actually, moving to the beat of my own drum, I guess, and, being on my own path, actually not being reliant on, an organisation or somebody else's agenda, or a boss for, the stability of your income and your career and that kind of thing. So, in creating financial freedom, I know that I'm responsible for that, the relationships that I build, the network that I create around me, helps create that financial freedom, and there's that energy exchange. So, money changes hands, but, people receive exactly what they need to out of that. So it's not that money hungry kind of, I need to get all the money, which some people have. It's more, there's a definite energy exchange around the service that I provide for people that then facilitates the lifestyle that I want for my family. Mm. So, I don't want to be going to an office and working 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. and, never seeing my kids and being too tired on the weekends to do anything and, really not wanting to take them to their sport after school and all of that kind of stuff. So financial freedom really facilitates being able to travel, which I've already mentioned that I love, and being able to, have new experiences and go new places and do things and just, live life, that's more balanced. Yeah. And I know that people talk about work-life balance, but even that is kind of limiting. It's more that concept of, you never work another day in your life because you love what you do. Mm. And therefore, you're creating freedom in many areas.
Yeah. So one of the things about these core needs is it's very important to remind ourselves of how vital it is to achieve them. And to do that, we have to almost go to the opposite of what that is in order to, because we know the lack of the core need is what really defines our path going forward. It's that pain that propels us forward. So I'm just going to invite you to do that right now, Jo. If you were to come up with a word that was the opposite of financial freedom. So imagine doing a 180-degree flip from financial freedom's out on your right-hand side. That's your direction, your North Star. what's more important to you than anything else. And now flip it 180 degrees to go to the opposite. If you could sum that up in one word, what would the opposite of financial freedom be?
Trapped.
Yeah, trapped.
So I feel like it'd be trapped in the system.
Yeah. And what does that feel like? Describe that. Yeah.
Well, I would feel like I need to escape absolutely from that life. Having lived that life, I felt very trapped, I think, in my corporate career.
So is that an option for you going forward, to risk that financial freedom and go back to that corporate life of where you're perpetually trapped?
No, because I think, everything would change then. I'd be unhappy. I wouldn't be fulfilling, the needs of my clients. And I, wouldn't be meeting the needs of my family really either.
No.
I'd be stuck with something that would be very lackluster and uninspiring, I would have to say.
And how would you feel at the end of your life looking back if that were the course of your life? Because we have to do this as powerful beings. We have to always look at that worst case scenario. How would you feel if that was the path your life took?
Probably like I'd failed, and I'd failed myself more than anything, because I hadn't, honoured my true purpose.
Yeah. So the magic of the triangle, thank you for that, for sharing that, Jo, because I agree that's the worst scenario, isn't it? That level of self-betrayal where you knew your path and then for whatever reason you didn't take it. So why we call it the magic triangle is it really describes what you need to do to make sure you do get that financial freedom. So do you want me to share that with you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I need to know.
Well, you do know. That's the thing. And as you've already said, it's when you ignored that inner knowing that trouble happened, that trouble struck. So essentially how the triangle works is that the two things at the base describe the path that you must take in order to achieve financial freedom. So it's almost like a very, very simple personal mission statement. And here's how it goes for you, Jo. It's through adventure and wisdom that I achieve financial freedom. In other words, you must stay loyal to this path because these are your core needs. They're coming from your intuitive self. So you already know what you need to do, and now here it is just in writing. It's now been verbalized. So through adventure, so maintaining, getting out of your comfort zone as much as you can, pushing yourself into areas where you're not comfortable, but where you know that you light up, whether it's physical experiences or maybe it's to do with your work, but keep it an adventurous ride, not getting sucked back into the comfort zone, as we all do at points. We go, I don't want to pick up and make that call or whatever. So pushing yourself, treating it as an adventure. And the more you do that, what the triangle is saying is the greater your level of self-awareness, also known as wisdom, is going to be. You're going to be able to tap into that intuitive self. The more you discard fear through adventure, the more self-awareness will rise to the surface. And this is what your clients are coming to you for. This is your gold, your ability to be intuitive, to guide them on their paths. And when you do that, if you stay true to this, then that's when you will achieve financial freedom, because that's the value that you're giving to the world. And financial freedom, as you say, is it living in exchange. Yep. It's putting out to the world what you love doing and receiving, not just in monetary terms, but receiving on all levels. Does that make sense, that description of your path? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, look, it absolutely does. And, I've had, like everybody, a few forks in the road where I haven't followed my intuition around what I should be doing, or I've done things and said, I'm just doing this for the money. So where I've taken on jobs and things like that, and it never works. So I personally feel that I am not suited to working, for somebody else. I'm much more suited to that entrepreneurial path, and I probably should have wanted that much earlier, but I sort of stepped in and out a number of times on my journey before I fully got there.
Well, you know what? The level of pain, I think, describes the level of success, and you just needed to experience more pain until you had sufficient reason to transition. But here's the wonderful thing about this core need, because this core need, financial freedom, and it probably ties into self-worth as well. It speaks to all of those things, really understanding your value, what you have to give to the world. So, and it might be financial, but it also might be other things, like just giving a fabulous book to the world is an amazing thing as well, so it can be freedom and at a profound level. But let's just speak to financial freedom, because this was potentially what was stopping you from making that move earlier. That's really like the nemesis, right? That feeling of being trapped is the thing that will propel you forward. And that's really the source of your passion, because you've known the pain of being trapped. And here's the funny thing, here's the twist, Jo, is that the thing that you most want for yourself, your core need, or if you like, your highest value, let's call it that, freedom, particularly financial freedom, is a clue as to what you have to give to others. In other words, think about this. Your journey forward might be in the area of helping other writers achieve financial freedom. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does. Yes.
It's basically, it's the journey that you know best, and that what we teach is where we really rise as teachers is teaching what we know, what we've experienced firsthand, and that's your journey. And that also probably describes your ideal audience as well, people who are where you were at a few years ago. So, does that make sense? Does that give you a little bit more clarity going forward?
Look, it absolutely does. And, I feel like I can see the potential in a lot of the people that I'm working with at the moment. So a lot of the aspiring authors, I can see potential where they don't see it yet. And, one of my authors, she has come like quite a long way in the last 6 weeks, really around, I've been working with her quite closely on building her self-confidence about, herself and herself as an author. And I could see the difference in her demeanour. So when I was chatting to her last night, I said, you look brighter and happier and more kind of alive, for want of a better term. And she said, it was amazing. Like, I procrastinated for so long about actually starting the writing. We'd done all the planning, and we'd done her bio, and we'd done a lot of other stuff. And she said, and as soon as I started writing, I could hear you in my head, another one who says that, saying, stick with the golden thread, carry that idea right through. And she said, and it just flowed. And then I felt so good afterwards. And I said, yes. And actually what you wrote was really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Jo. Honestly, I think you've got, I can see that you're on your path, and I can see that you're going to help many, many people find their freedom, just as you're finding yours, whether it's financial freedom or just freedom from that feeling of being suffocated, trapped because you're playing life too small. We all know what that feels like. So thank you so much for, sharing your story, and particularly, the struggle parts, just going back to that period that was probably the hardest point, enduring that office bullying. And, for anyone listening, if you're in that spot right now, just think of it this way, that maybe, what if this was the best thing that was happening to you? What if this was a wake the F up call in your life to start taking action and find out what you're truly capable of? So, Joanne Martin, thank you so much for being such an inspiring guest, and thank you for all the wonderful work that you're putting out into the world.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thank you. All right. And if you want to know more about Joanne, it's here in all the show notes. You'll find her contact details, how to get in touch with her. And, if you've got that inkling, that desire of, could I, should I, at least get in contact with Jo. And like she said, she doesn't work with everyone, but if she senses a spark in you that's waiting to emerge, I'm sure she can pick up on that. All right. Thanks, Joanne. Bye for now.
Thank you.
You have just listened to another enlightening episode of Wake the F Up with Janet Hogan. To find out more about the breakthrough guided way to get off the hamster wheel and seize a life of freedom and fulfillment, visit janethogan.com/podcast for access to the show notes and to learn more about Janet's breakthrough work. Just remember, finding your true path isn't potluck, it's a process. Until next time.